I think someone's been living in my basement. I've always been a night owl, the type of person who enjoys the quiet hours when the world feels like it's gone to sleep. My house, a modest two-story on the outskirts of town, is usually my sanctuary during those hours. It's peaceful, tucked away from the bustle, with the kind of silence that lets you hear the creak of the floorboards or the distant hoot of an owl. But lately, that silence has been broken. It started about 3 weeks ago. I was sitting on the couch, binging a new series, when I heard a sound. At first, I thought it was the pipes. An old house like mine is bound to have some quirks. But then I heard it again, louder this time. A thud. It came from the basement. I paused the TV and listened. Another thud, followed by what sounded like a faint scraping noise. I told myself it was nothing, a box shifting, maybe a mouse. Still, I grabbed a flashlight and crept down the stairs. The basement was as it always was, damp, cluttered, and dimly lit by a single overhead bulb. Nothing seemed out of place. But as I turned to go back upstairs, I noticed something strange. One of the boxes in the corner, a heavy one full of old books, was slightly ajar, as though it had been moved. I shrugged it off, thinking I must have bumped it at some point, and went back upstairs. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the sounds became more frequent. Sometimes it was soft, footsteps, or what I thought might be footsteps. Other times, it was louder, the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. I started avoiding the basement altogether, telling myself it was just my imagination. But then, things started disappearing. At first, it was small things, a flashlight, a pack of batteries, a bag of chips I was sure I'd left in the pantry. Then, one morning, I came downstairs to find the back door unlocked. I knew I'd locked it the night before. That was the moment I stopped brushing things off as coincidence. I decided to install cameras. I bought a few cheap ones online and set them up in the living room, the kitchen, and, most importantly, the basement. They connected to an app on my phone, so I could check them anytime. The first few nights, there was nothing unusual. I checked the footage obsessively, but all I saw were shadows shifting as the lights flickered. Then, on the fourth night, I saw it. At around 2:30 a.m., the camera in the basement picked up movement. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding as I watched the screen. At first, it was just a shadow, a faint, indistinct shape near the back of the basement. But then it moved closer, stepping into the light of the camera. It was a man. He was thin, with unkempt hair and clothes that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. He moved carefully, like he was trying not to make any noise, and he was carrying something. A bundle of blankets, maybe? I watched in horror as he made his way to the far corner of the basement. There, he pushed aside an old shelf, revealing a small, hidden door I'd never noticed before. He disappeared inside, pulling the shelf back into place behind him. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I called the police. 2 officers showed up and searched the basement thoroughly. They moved the shelf and found the door, just as I described. Behind it was a small crawl space, barely big enough for a person to lie down in. It was filled with junk, empty food wrappers, a tattered sleeping bag, and what looked like a makeshift pillow made from an old sweater. "He's been living here," one of the officers said, shaking his head. They didn't find the man, though. He must have slipped out while I was upstairs. I thought that would be the end of it. The police said they'd keep an eye on the area, and I made sure to lock every door and window before going to bed. But then, a few nights later, I heard the sounds again. This time, it wasn't just thuds or scraping. It was a whisper, a low, raspy voice, speaking words I couldn't understand. I checked the cameras again, my hands shaking as I navigated the app. The basement feed showed nothing unusual at first, just the same cluttered room, bathed in the dim glow of the overhead bulb. Then the whispering started again. The camera glitched, the feed distorting with static. And then, for just a moment, I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the basement, staring directly into the camera. His face was gaunt, his eyes wide and unblinking. And then he smiled. The police came again, but there was no sign of him. They told me it was probably just an old squatter who'd gotten spooked and wouldn't be back. But I knew better. That smile wasn't the smile of someone who was scared. It was the smile of someone who knew something I didn't. I've started hearing the whispers during the day now, faint and distant but unmistakable. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in the corner of my eye, but when I turn, there's nothing there. Last night, I woke up to find my bedroom door ajar. I haven't gone back to the basement. I don't think I ever will. But deep down, I know he's still here. And he's not alone.